Hi, this is Greg Arnold with John Broughton on Retrospectives, KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Happy birthday, Helen.
Just go right back to the beginning to start us off. Who were the first songwriters to inspire you to want to write songs yourself?
Well, I haven't really ever wanted to do anything else other than be a songwriter. So way back in the 70s, I guess, that really big era of the singer-songwriter in the early 70s had a huge influence, be it, your Elton Johns and Cat Stevens, and but the really huge one for me was the Beatles. I had sort of a really, I guess, a real keen obsession in the Beatles, and that's never really waned, as they sort of underpin all of what I do as a writer.
Looking through your record collection as a youngster, could you pinpoint a uniform quality amongst the artists and bands that you really loved?
I would say melody would be the big one. That's what I guess I'm always drawn to that, and so that would be a feature of the weightiest artists I'd be into, but also I suppose things like ABBA through the 70s probably had a huge melodic impact as well, and that would be the thing that I've pretty much always favoured in my my musical taste. And it was as I got a bit older, when I was at uni and things, that I started to really get into more acoustic instrumentation. But I guess that would largely come from I spent a lot of time in the 80s mucking around on synthesizers and the like, and really that began to rob me a bit of my passion for music. So it was the rediscovery of acoustic instrumentation that really refocused my musical attention.
Tell us about the beginnings of Things of Stone and Wood. It all came out of high school, didn't it?
Well, sort of. I went to high school with Mikey in Things of Stone and Wood, and we'd sort of been mucking around playing music here and there in different forms, and he joined 13 at Midnight, which was my 80s goth synth band, just at the tail end of that band. And it was with Mikey that I really noticed. We started singing together, and it just is the first time I'd ever had anything that sort of fairly effortlessly started to sound good. And then we got together and played with Tony, who is in fact my brother-in-law now, and we played at my wife Helen's birthday, and that sort of got things rolling there. And then Justin, Tony knew Justin, and I'll never forget that first rehearsal where we just got together and played, and Mike and I were looking at over each other, and we just couldn't believe it. It was just every time you play something, it just sounded fantastic. So it was pretty clear from the very first rehearsal that was a pretty strong band. We'd never experienced anything like it before.
Did you actually put together a blueprint for the sound of the band, or just all happened organically, I guess?
Yeah, it was really happened organically. I guess, like I said, towards the end of the 80s there, I guess I'd almost, I'd released an independent album and things with 13 at Midnight. I was quite, I guess, worn out by how difficult that whole process was. And so Mikey just came round and said, this new stuff you're doing, this sounds great. Why don't we form a band? And I was sort of not into it to start with. And then it did kind of happen organically, because he'd keep coming round, we'd have a few drinks, start singing, and I noticed it was sounding pretty good, and that sort of led to the playing together. So there was no real plan as such, I guess, except that it was underpinned by that desire for it to be organic and simple and acoustic, and, based on fairly, I suppose, simple and timeless production ideas, rather than what I felt was the time was the sort of gratuitous bombast of the late 80s.
It's hard to believe now. It's been 15 years since you're enjoying enormous commercial success, top 10 hits, ARIA awards and everything. How do you look back on that time now?
Well, I actually look back on it. At the time, it was quite confronting, and I think for a band of our nature, I don't suppose... I was always torn between this funny psychological position where, I suppose like so many bands at that time, I guess we were sort of wanted the band to go well and we were very into the band, but also we had this funny relationship, I guess, with our own success. So I would have to say that was a fairly complicated time for me when it was actually happening. Now I just look back on it and just go, what a blast, what a thing to have in your life, really.
Yeah. So looking back, do you think you coped okay with it though at the time?
Well, no, not really. I think I spent a lot of time determined not to let it affect me, to the point where it became a bit of an overcompensation, that I was so determined not to let it affect me that in some ways that didn't acknowledge the reality of the situation, which was that to be, in the pop charts and travelling around and something, jumping out of a van and playing shows to thousands of people and all that sort of stuff, it's just not a realistic situation in your life. It's not very related to real life. So, so it was really confronting. I would say I didn't really cope very well with it. Not in the I guess it was just a psychological thing that I felt it hard to deal with. I suppose everybody would. But as I said, it's more in retrospect when I look back and I just go, gee, what an experience that was to have.
Yeah. And when you are in the public eye like that, sometimes you are a target for parody, and you were at the time sent up on television, a rather famous parody by the Late Show team, another Melbourne cliche. Do you remember that?
I do. Well, of course, it's my second most requested song nowadays.
Is it really? Did that sit okay with you at the time?
Yeah, no, it's a funny thing because, well, the way we found out about that was that we bumped into Frente's manager on a flight, and she said to us, "Oh, it's your turn now," because they got a bit of a roast as well. And I remember I was so nervous about watching it because I guess, the whole song and the whole spirit of the thing, we knew they were going to have a go at Happy Birthday Helen, and that's very deeply personal stuff for me. So I just didn't watch it. I let the other guys watch it and sort of report back, and they came back to me and they said, "Oh, actually, it's pretty funny. Actually, and it's not. They're kind of having more of a go at the kind of clip and stuff than any of the content of the song or anything." So I watched it. Actually, it was very funny. I thought the thing I thought was funny about it was you'd kind of look at all the other guys in the band, going, "Gee, haven't they done a good job on them?" Totally missing that they're doing an absolutely brilliant job in ripping me apart as well. But it was great, actually. It was a very funny thing, and I had friends of mine who were telling me, they fess up to this later. They were all sitting there and they were all trying to go, "Oh, how dare the Late Show ever go at Greg?" And then halfway through it, they started going, "Oh, it's pretty funny, actually, isn't it?"
After all that, did you feel a record company pressure upon you to come up with the goods again for album number 2?
Well, not enormously, I guess. And the story of our second album's probably, in a lot of ways, become, I guess, misunderstood in those terms. We're never really under that much pressure, insofar as any act ever who is on a label of the magnitude of Sony will not be under pressure. Record companies like that, they're written in the absolute brickwork of the company, is that any band that they sign is under pressure to sell records. I guess for us, we went out on a pretty, largely at my, where I was at as a writer, we went out on a pretty dark kind of tangent, and that certainly put a lot of pressure on the relationship with the record company at that time. But even at the time, I think I understood where the record company was coming from with that. But that's a understandable position they would take, and I felt we took an artistic risk. And for a while there, it looked, Wildflowers was one of the most played songs on the radio the year it was released, and it certainly looked like that that album was going to sort of be received well and understood and all that. Ultimately, it obviously didn't go as well as the first one, and I think times moved on, and we sort of caught a little outside the times after that.
So what was there a particular catalyst in bringing about the parting of the band from Sony Records?
Well, I think it would be fair to say that the relationship was not great after that second album there. So there was no particular catalyst other than the fact that nobody was really happy with things as they were. So, if you were to say, was there a catalyst, I guess it would be that the second album didn't go as well as the first album, which is fairly classic stuff, I guess.
True. Did you feel a greater freedom, though, after that point, being able to put out material independently?
Well, particularly to start with, I mean, we went a bit nuts, really. We released a live album, a round one microphone album, and another sort of different trip again, and a sort of more guitar pop album, all in the matter of about 18 months. And we definitely enjoyed that freedom. But while we enjoyed the freedom, I think you do get a little used to having that massive machine behind you and taking it for granted a little, and we definitely felt that as well at that point. But I think for Things of Stone and Wood, a big feature of things was we toured very hard, and it was really a band that got a lot of its whole spirit from that live playing. But after a certain amount of time, that you can't really sustain that.
Yeah.
In a band of that style. Well, we couldn't sustain that. So there was sort of a point where fairly naturally things started to fall apart for the band around about that mid to late 90s period.
You did reconvene the band again back in, I think, about 2002, I think it was. Was that that reunion always a possibility? The door was never totally shut on the band?
Well, I'm not a big one for totally shutting the doors, and I'm particularly not a big one for totally shutting the door on that band. I think the one experience I've had with Things of Stone and Wood is whatever happens, whenever you get that group of people together, it really is, there's something about it as a live band, and for me, that's a very exciting thing. So when you play, it's a really clear chemistry. And even though everyone's off doing different stuff, it is pretty reliable that you all get together and play and go, wow, that's pretty good. It's very exciting for me as a songwriter to hear my songs sound exciting in the way that Things of Stone and Wood makes it happen. So I guess the door never was closed on it. I particularly came back to it because of a writing style thing, that I'd gone to a place where I was much more into, I suppose, on a bit of a teenage fan club sort of trip, very melodic guitar pop was really all I was listening to, all I was wanting to write. The Things of Stone and Wood album, Whirligig, really showed that, and the following album I did, Tricycle, showed that, I guess. But after that, I really came back to what I think of as much more of a Things of Stone and Wood style, and it was very obvious to me that Things of Stone and Wood would be the perfect medium for that.
When you started putting together your own material outside of the band, such as Tricycle, were you intent on trying to make it distinguishable from your previous work? You were trying to avoid the comparisons?
Well, it wasn't that I was trying to avoid the comparisons, I guess. It really was just, I've always let the music dictate where I go, and I think in some ways that's nice and clear. The possibilities are mindless out there, as we say, as to what you do with your songs. So in some ways I like to say, well, what sort of song is this? What setting would this sound the best? And for me, that sort of, at that period, that guitar-y pop was really the sort of music I was writing. And so I felt, I guess if I felt any issue with that era, it would be as to how appropriate it was to try and encompass that sort of sound in Things of Stone and Wood over the album Whirligig, while there are a lot of bold new directions for the band at that point. that felt a slightly uncomfortable dance between those two styles. When I was off on my own, it wasn't very hard to just go there sort of more absolutely.
Has your method of songwriting changed much over the years? Do you actually go about the process in any different way that you did in the beginning?
No, not really. It's really interesting to me at the moment as well, because I've had a period where I've just written a whole lot of songs again, and it's a real reminder to me they really do come unbidden. You just, one minute you're walking along. I like to write in my head a lot nowadays because that stops me going to the same places on the guitar or choosing the same key just because I'm familiar with playing it. But essentially the same thing happens over and over. It's a melody that I can tell is over a certain run of chords, and I'll be singing some gibberish, and suddenly that gibberish will turn into a song. And I always figure if I can remember it, it must be worth hearing again.
Do you have a Songwriters Radar that is always up looking for material?
Well, I think I used to be much more, much more focused on that as really the main thing I did, and I would still think of that as the central thing of my working and artistic life is songwriting. But I suppose at the moment I'm much less concerned about it. It's not attached to any particular, I guess, artistic ambition at the moment. So in some ways it's quite liberating. You just say, oh, here's a new song. That's how it goes. Got no real clear, definite context for anything at the moment. And I guess that does liberate you, sort of receive whatever material lands in your lap.
Yeah. You've been doing a bit of production work too for other people?
Yes. I started doing that in the late 90s. I always really enjoyed it. I had a great working relationship with James Black in Things of Stone and Wood, and I was filled with enormous admiration for his work as a producer. And that was a massive influence on me. It's fairly, other than making your own records, it's the most fun you can have is getting right into the brickwork and working on someone else's records. It's just great fun.
Is it an advantage working as a producer and also being a musician yourself in terms of communicating with the artist?
I think so. If there's one thing that I've found that is a real advantage, I guess, because in some ways I'm a terrible engineer, and there's a lot of classic production skills, I guess, that I don't have. But the one I do feel I have is that I understand particularly the songwriter, their relationship with the recording. I understand that process. Absolutely, having been through it myself so many times, and different producers here and there.
Is it a field you'd like to go further into, or are you happy just keeping it at the level that you've done so far?
Well, yeah, I've really loved doing the production work that I've done. I guess over the last couple of years I've made a few records where we really took our time and didn't feel any pressure to rush through the records or anything. Say the record with Skipping Girl Vinegar, which is about to come out, Harris's last album, and an album by an artist called Chloe Hall. On all of those ones, I actually went over to Nashville to mix them, and we really went the distance on the records, and I think it really shows on the records. From the first moment of talking about the songs, and meeting up the songs, to the very last note of mastering, I felt they were very thorough, vigorous albums, and it was incredibly satisfying as a producer. And I think if I was to say the sort of production I would like to keep doing, it would be that sort of production.
Now, your most recent solo outing, Lost Marie, has been described as a series of story songs and not as personal as your past work. Did you really feel a need to step away from that personal element of your writing?
Yeah, I did. It was a bit of an artistic challenge to just say, that is it. You know, even if I'm feeling something myself that I would normally put straight into a song, I was very determined to put it into the life of another character, and also experiment with things that weren't biographical and just be a storyteller. It was really enjoyable sticking to that discipline across an entire album. And, I felt it was a fantastic experience for me as a writer to just, I suppose, to get over myself. It was good.
So I guess, having said that, would you call it a concept album as such? So you actually sat down with a plan to put together a collection of songs like that?
Well, I guess it is. Yeah, it's a concept album without the 20-minute guitar solos. You've just given me an idea for my next album. Now, that's it. Guitar solos are plenty. They're back.
And playing live these days, Greg, who's in your band now?
Well, when I play, which is not as much as I used to, I tend to play with Ian Kitney, who plays with Tim Rogers, and Benji, who plays with Karis and was very, very instrumental, literally, in the Tea and Sympathy album with Bernard Fanning. We toured for a large amount of time over the early part of this decade, and that act just really got strong. So that's who I tend to play with when I do band shows, and I do quite a bit of solo stuff as well. But I've actually sort of intentionally tried to play a little less lately. I feel after 20 years or whatever it is of playing pretty much non-stop, it's important to, as Dave Graney once said, I think every act has to have a disappearing act. I think, I have to sort of step out from playing live, really, play a lot less, and almost intentionally get to the point where I would love to roll up to a gig and be really nervous again. And I can't think of the last time I was nervous before a gig. And I would really enjoy that sensation again, and I think a bit of time away from that might get me, I guess, remind me how exciting it is to play a show, and how, you should sit backstage trembling before you go on.
Sure.
And obviously over the years that's disappeared a bit. Not that I haven't always loved playing live, I really do enjoy it. It's just I think it's something that I have possibly started to take a little for granted in my life. So that's the live plan.
And what else is coming up for you for the rest of 2008?
Well, I'm teaching nowadays, so that's a lot of fun. I lecture in music at NMIT, and I'm loving that. And I also I think I'll be looking forward to Sipping Your Vinegar's record coming out. That's going to be a lot of fun. And Karis, I think, is about to start work on another album. So we're talking about songs and things to do with that at the moment. That'll be a fun record as well. And for me, I'm just writing a bit and slowly watching as this new record I have over the next couple of years start to take shape in my mind. And I wrote a couple of songs a couple of weeks ago, and that really just started to lock in my own mind, going, right, this is how this is going to sound.
Fantastic. Well, still plenty to keep you busy. Greg, your signal's starting to fade away, so I don't think we'll chance it any longer. It's been great catching up with you.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thanks for all the wonderful songs that you've brought us over the years, and we're sure there's many, many more to come. And we can't wait for you to get.
My pleasure.
Can't wait for you to get that nervous feeling back again. We'll see you back on our stages.
Great, fantastic.
Good on you, Greg. Thanks a lot.
Okay, no, done.
All the best. Cheers. Bye.